it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the spot!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Happy Friday, everybody. Producer Shayne filling in for Matt O'Hayan tonight, who is not in Florida with Tony, okay? He just caught a bug. He's sick. He lost his voice, so obviously that's a bit of an issue. So I'm glad to fill in for him. Not so glad that I had to watch that game, however. Snooze fest, I think, is probably the appropriate term, and we'll get into it with our good friend Jared Book in just a moment. But first, obviously, we have to thank our sponsors for bringing you this show, starting with Energy Transportation Group. They're a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. As well, La Bittt at Tibi, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. La Bittt at Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bittt at Tibi, embrace your true nature. As well, Playground. Experience the world-renowned poker experience with free food and drinks at their cash game tables. A bet beat jackpot that is closing in on $1.5 million. Weekly promotions, daily tournaments, and unmatched customer service. Why play anywhere else? Located just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes from downtown Montreal. Playground. And last but not least, Sport Buff Shop. Shop all your sports licensed lifestyle apparel, including hoodies, caps, and tees of your favorite teams from all major leagues at sportsbuffshop.com. Use code SICK10 for 10% off all their items. All right, let's bring him in from Habs. Eyes on the prize, Jared Book. Glad to see you're still awake, my friend. Granted, you know what? That last part of the third period was sort of exciting, I guess, but my goodness, what a terrible game that was.
Yeah, you know, the first two games were kind of like the chaotic preseason. This game was just the going through the motions preseason. Like there was nothing good about that. Like even, you know, like when your best player is John Parker Jones, it's not a good game. And that's no disrespect to John Parker Jones. I think he'll even admit that he shouldn't be the best player on the ice for a team. So it was not a very pretty game. We're getting to that point in the preseason where the veterans are just like, all right, let's get to the first game. And all the rookies are like, all right, we're probably not going to, we're not at the level we need to be in the NHL. So it's kind of a catch-22, and you get games like this, unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, credit to John Parker Jones, because he did play a great game. And I think he will stick with Laval. I don't know that he's going to get sent down to Trois-Rivières this year, but we have to touch on the power play. Okay, and I get it, right? We put it into context. There's only about 2 players that played power play tonight that will play the PP during the regular season, that being Josh Anderson and Sean Monahan. Everyone else is not supposed to be on the power play. So we'll preface with that. But that being said, wow, just horrible, just not like worse than even I imagined. And they let in a goal, right? Credit to Matthew Nyes and Fraser Minton, who I didn't know before coming into this game really showed up. But Good Lord, like nothing even remotely remotely close to happening on the power plays, and there were a ton of them.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of two things. First of all, these aren't the players who are practicing the power play even, right? Like, even when they're doing reps in practice or throughout training camp, it's not you're not going to have Jake Evans out there, right? Like he's not the guy who's going to be there. Having said that, there are a lot of players who are going to be on Laval's top power play or were on Laval's top power play, and that one was pretty good. And
It was.
it
Yeah.
just wasn't working. And I think that what you're seeing is that it's a scheme issue. It's not a
Mhm.
player issue, because when you have 5 players and the other team has 4, you should be able to at least get some scoring chances, right? It doesn't matter who your players are. And it's not
Yep.
like the Leafs had the best penalty killers in the world out there either, right? Like you should be able to generate something. And I think what we're seeing is what we've seen for the last, 3, 4, 5 years, is that the Canadiens' power play scheme is just not very good. And yes, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield can cover up some of those blemishes, but not many of them, as we've seen the last couple of years, and especially not when you have Yoel Armia and Brendan Gallagher, and yes, they're very hardworking players a lot of the time, but Justin Barron, like he's a good power play player usually, and he was
Mhm.
handling the puck like it was a grenade out there,
Yeah.
and it's just it's not frustrating at this point because it's been happening for so long, and I don't know. Obviously, you don't want to show all your tricks either right now, but it just seems like a lot of um, the players out there just they know what to do. Like they've scored power play goals. I've seen
Yeah.
Nicolas Beaudin and Justin Barron score power play goals before. They're not that bad, but tonight was not a shining statement by any means.
Far from it. Far from it. Now, staying on the power play for a second. Obviously, we haven't seen the full units yet, but in the regular season, right? Like you mentioned, we're getting used to seeing a below average power play, to be kind, right? It's never been a threat for the Habs. So you seem to be hinting towards scheming, which would be the responsibility of Alex Burrows, who is in charge of the power play. Now, how long do you wait in the regular season? Like how much leash do you give him? Because it's not been working, right? And we like the Habs have the tools. So what do we do in that scenario?
I mean, it's been 2.5 years and they haven't done anything. So, I mean, when's the time to change? I don't know. But I mean, yes, I don't want to blame him 100% for,
Hmm.
when he took over. I mean, that, the expectation when he took over for Kirk Muller, remember, was that, oh, he's going to fix it. And,
Hmm.
and he didn't. Even in that playoff run, the power play was not very good. And then when, last year, the half Ducharme, half St. Louis year was, I mean, no one was scoring in that first half of the season. And then, Martin St. Louis came on and everyone's like, oh, maybe he'll fix the power play. And, and still, it doesn't look very good. And so
Hmm.
I don't know how many times they have to try doing the same thing and realizing it's not going to work
Yeah.
before changing things. And like I said, it's still preseason. They might be working on things that we're not seeing in games. Like I don't think this unit, other than the morning skate today, and even today was an optional skate. I don't think this unit ever practiced the power play together, right? So I don't want to read too much into this game in particular, or even in the preseason. It's a lot like football, right? Football teams don't show their whole playbook in the preseason, especially when you're playing divisional rivals like the Canadiens are the entire preseason. Like they play Ottawa and Toronto 5 out of 6 games. You don't want to necessarily show all your tricks, but yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you have to think that they're going to change something. And the power play didn't look that bad in the Ottawa game. I found that they
No.
got
Yeah.
chances. I was really impressed with Matthias Norlinder, who didn't really get power play minutes in Laval either,
Mhm.
and he really showed that he can belong. He set up Cole Caulfield for a couple of chances in that one. So I'm not reading too much into it, but I think that eventually something's going to have to change. We thought it would maybe change before last season, and it didn't really.
Mhm.
And I think the expectation is that this year it should get better, but I mean, if they don't, I mean, they're gonna have to change something. Whether it's the coach who's in charge of it, or just not trying the exact same thing they've been trying for the last what seems like 2.5 years, 3 years. I feel like if you told Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield to just go out there and try something, they probably have more success than trying to think too much, like they seem to be doing a lot. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's concerning, but also it's not like they're expected to make the playoffs. So like if they lose a couple of games because they don't score on the power play as often as they should, is it really that big of a deal? But eventually, you're gonna have to put the feet to the fire at some point, whether it's this year or next year, or whenever, because the talent is coming. You can see it. It wasn't so evident tonight, let's be honest, but the talent is coming in this organization. Like there's going to be some players who are going to be expected to score on the power play. They already have. Like when you have Cole Caulfield, and they haven't had him for 82 games yet. Let's be honest there. But if you have him for 82 games, you're going to expect a good number of power play goals just from him alone. So it's the pressure is going to mount at some point. But yeah, again, I don't want to read too much into this game because it was really ugly. But it's preseason. You mentioned the regulars aren't really there. Even a guy like Anderson and Monahan, they're probably going to be on the second power play unit, not the first. So I mean, it's not really that big a deal. I mean, I thought they had some good looks. Even today's game. I mean, you had Joshua Waugh, who was on the right wall. I think it was in the second period, where he had a couple of good looks, and they were just a little bit too slow. Like Gallagher had a pass in his skates. Baudin was just a little bit too slow to reverse the ice a little bit. So they had some good looks, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything to hang your hat on if you're Alex Burrows, that's for sure.
Oh, no, that's it. But when the time comes to be competitive, you need your special units. You need your PK, you need your PP to be elite, to be threatening. And right now it's not. So anyways, we're not there yet. That's the good part in a sense. And we haven't even seen Lane Hudson yet, who will likely be the PP quarterback. So patience with that. We're not panicking yet. The time will come, though. Now, a player that you've mentioned already is Justin Barron. Obviously a massive turnover on the power play caused, the Matthew Nice goal. Overall, not his game, but you know what? Against New Jersey, I really liked his game. So it's like, I don't want to talk too fast, but I still think that he needs some time in Laval. Where do you see him starting the season?
If you would have asked me before camp started, I would have been like, he's going to start in the NHL, and it's starting. I would have said the same thing in the beginning of last year's camp, and it's starting to be the same story where he's kind of playing himself out of a spot. I say kind of because I don't really know if there's anybody really to replace him on that right side right now. Like Gustav Lindstrom is great, but I think he's more of a seventh defenseman. So I don't know what they're going to do on that right side. Obviously, David Savard has one of those spots to start the season. That's for sure. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to start the season with David Reinbacher there. It's hard to say, but I mean, if Barron does get sent down, obviously he's one of the guys who doesn't need waivers either. So if they want to put like either Gooley or Harris on the other side, they could probably get away with it. Obviously, Kovacevic is another guy who's on that right side who does need waivers and will likely have a spot. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I like Justin Barron as a player. He just seems to have really slow starts in camp, and this is the second year in a row that he's kind of playing himself out of a spot at times. But I mean, again, I don't want to read too much into one game because it's kind of hard also to be a puck moving defenseman when it seems like most of your teammates are going at 70% speed. Like Josh Anderson wasn't playing full out, and that's no disrespect to Josh Anderson. He doesn't need to. Same thing with guys like Pat Pearson and Gallagher. I remember right after they signed Travis Moen, probably like 10 years ago at this point, and he had a really bad preseason, and people were like, oh no, like did they sign a guy who was washed up? And I remember it was somebody who said that like a guy like Travis Moen can't play like Travis Moen 82 games plus playoffs plus preseason. Like it just doesn't work that way. And I feel like guys like Anderson and Gallagher and Monahan and Pearson are kind of in that spot. Like you can't ask them to play their game through preseason also. Like they're just trying to get to the season healthy. So, and that's hard for a guy like Barron, right? Like, and even the other D on the team as well today. I mean, I feel like you have some guys going 70-80% speed, and it just isn't easy. That's why the offsides happen. That's why a lot of things look out of sync on the power play as well. So it's just one of those things. Like you noticed in the last 2 minutes when they had like the chances to tie the game, everybody started playing better, and that's when you could see like the effort being there. And again, it's preseason. Like I'm not, like it's normal that happens, right? These guys aren't going to play like they're going to play in the regular season. And I think that's the case, and that makes it hard for guys who are made to pass the puck or move the puck up ice and make that first pass, because they're not necessarily getting open as much as they would in a regular season game.
That's it. I have to highlight, Barron did make a really nice block there, and it led to an offensive opportunity. That was a great play, right? So it's these flashes that he has that you can see there's potential there. And if it's developed properly, this guy's going to be a lock for an NHL defenseman for many years. And him being a right-handed defenseman is a hot commodity. So I really want to hone in on his development this year. He needs to get all the chances he can get. I think he'll get those in Laval, right? Running that PP1 first pairing, getting those minutes. I feel like that's the best fit for him. Now, two players, when I first saw the lineup for tonight, I can't really say I get excited, right? Like, oh, okay, Joshua was playing cool, Owen Beck, nice. But there were two new faces that Habs fans had yet to see, that being Tanner Pearson and Gustav Lindstrom, playing their first game at the Bell Center. Now, Pearson to me was invisible for the most part, like didn't really stand out, didn't do anything substantial, but at the same time, being invisible means you didn't do anything bad either, right? So he's just in the middle, right? So where do you kind of see Tanner Pearson fitting in the lineup? Because he brings something, you're right? This is a young team. He's a veteran. He's won the Stanley Cup. He is valuable within this lineup, but I'm just not sure where.
Yeah, I think that the thing with the Canadiens at forward right now is that they have like all the pieces pretty much locked in, but where they go is kind of up in the air, and I think that's one of those things. Like a guy like Pearson, like he had the scrimmage, the red-white scrimmage when he played with Caulfield and Suzuki, and now tonight he played with Evans and Gallagher. I think, or Anderson, or they were mixing up that kind of those top two lines a little bit, and I kind of see him. That's kind of where I think he'll be. Right, he'll be on that third or fourth line. I think they're going to give every opportunity to guys like Uri Slafkovsky and Raphael Harvey-Pinard, among others, in that kind of. I think the Canadiens are going to be more of a top 9 team, especially if they put Doc and Newhook at center. I think that's really where they're going to be. So the order doesn't really bother me that much, but I think that he'll be either in that top 9 or just outside of it. And the Canadiens are going to have a much better fourth line than they did for a lot of last year. And yes, a lot of that was injuries, but you start the season, I think they had Evans, Armia, to start the year in the fourth line, and that's probably going to be close to what it's going to be this year. But I think you're going to have. Sometimes Gallagher might be on that fourth line. Pearson might be on that fourth line. And I think that's kind of where he fits. But the advantage of those guys that if there are injuries, they can play a little bit higher up in the lineup. And, this team isn't going like, if Tanner Pearson's in your top 6 or Brendan Gallagher's in your top 6 in 2023, that's not necessarily a good thing. But this Canadiens team is not competing anyway. So it doesn't really matter if they're your second options or third options. And I think that's where he is. And like I alluded to before, him being invisible is fine. Like it's not really a big deal. He has 1 year left on his contract. Like there's no, he was traded for somebody who, most Canadiens fans will not remember was even part of the organization. And again, that's no disrespect to Casey DeSmith. It's just one of those things, right? So it's one of those things where he's a good veteran to have. He's there so you don't have to rush a guy like Joshua Roy into the NHL right away. So for me, it's going to be very interesting because they have a lot of players who can play up in the lineup and have played up in the lineup who might not. So I mean, they're gonna be. Every time I look at this Canadiens roster, they don't strike me as like, oh, they're gonna make the playoffs, but they strike me as like this team isn't going to be that bad. Like if they stay healthy, they have some interesting depth pieces. Like, if you would have told me like, Tanner Pearson, Brendan Gallagher in your bottom six, like, okay, that's where they should be. It's not bad, especially if you have a third line with Newhook, who's looked pretty good so far as well. So it's going to be very interesting. And yeah, I see Pearson as more of like a guy who's just there to make things better and is more flexible than a guy like Mike Hoffman would have been, right? Like Mike Hoffman has to play offensively, and that's it, right? Tanner Pearson's a little bit more flexible and a little bit more roles you can play him in, and I think that versatility helps him. It helps a guy like Brendan Gallagher. It even helps a guy like Joel Armia. I know that a lot of people don't like him, and he doesn't live up to his salary, but I mean he's a guy who can. If he's on your fourth line, like that's not that bad. Like there's a lot of playoff teams that would want Joel Armia on their fourth line, and it's just a situation where he gets those chances and doesn't look very good when he has the puck. But I mean, we're a few years away from Arturi Lehkonen being that guy, and he turned out to be pretty good once he started converting some of those chances. Like I'm not saying they're comparable, but there's a thing for being in the right place at the right time that often, that if you don't convert, it's not the end of the world. But a lot of times, like he does make frustrating plays. Like that's the thing that happens with him sometimes.
That's it. And tonight was no exception because it was tough to watch. I'm not gonna lie. He was given a lot of opportunity. He was playing with Monahan and Anderson. He was getting power play time. Just nothing happened. And in fact, I thought, he hurt the team almost in some situations. It really sucks to see because we know that when Joel Armia turns it on, this guy's getting, a hat trick, right? He'll go like 20 games without scoring, doing nothing. And then one random Tuesday night, he'll score 3 goals and be the best player you ever seen. It's so frustrating that he can't find the consistency to be the player that he was drafted to be, because he was drafted like fairly high. I think like top 15, top 16 or something by Buffalo. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with Armia there. But tonight, I mean, didn't really leave a good impression, I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't want to read too much into veterans in the preseason. Like they're still getting their feel for the puck, right? Like there's something to be said for playing, and the things that he's doing wrong is like converting chances, picking up the puck. And yes, those are things that he's done in the regular season too. But I feel like when you get touches, and you saw it a little bit even with Juraj Slafkovsky in the first game, like there was a lot of rust early on. Like he was in the right spot, he was doing the right thing, but just not doing the right thing with the puck. And then as he started playing more, and then in the second game, he looked a lot better. And I think that's something that's going to happen as well for a lot of the guys. And Armia is just, we have to stop expecting too much of him. Like it's kind of like I don't want to compare the two because it's completely different, but it's kind of like Jonathan Drouin. Like yes, there's potential there, but he's told us over and over again what kind of player he is. Like Joel Armia is a middle six, bottom six player who's gonna be in the right place in the right time, but he's also gonna squander some chances every now and then. Like that's just who he is. And I he's a good player to have in the playoffs. Like you watch that playoff run, he was like winning every board battle he was in. Like that's what he does well. And he's smart. Like he puts himself in good positions. That's why he's always in a good spot to do something. And then, sometimes makes the wrong decision. And that's just, it's just kind of what he is at this point. Right. And you kind of have to take the good with the bad. The good is that he's getting those situations. and that's what good players do. But let's face it. If he was converting on all of his chances or making good plays all the time, he'd be paid even more than he's being paid now, right? Like it's just one of those things. But I mean, it's frustrating. But I mean, those are the things you have to learn to live with. Like there's a lot of players who play bottom 6 minutes who are in the right spot and just can't do anything with it, right? Like, when those bottom 6 players get 2-on-1s and miss the net and don't even get a shot, like it happens. And Neil Army is a big target. Because he's a big player. He's always involved, right? Like that's why he doesn't really, you don't miss him, right? Like Tanner Pearson, you mentioned he's invisible. Like Yo Armia can't be invisible because he's always near the puck. It's just he's always in good position, but for him it's like a blessing and a curse, right? Like it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because he's always under the spotlight.
Yep.
And he doesn't always make the right play and takes a little too long, and that's just what he is. But luckily he's not being relied on to do much more, right? Like it's not like the 3-4 years ago when he was asked to be in like the second line, right? Like that's not the role he's asked to play anymore. But he still has value, and I think that as that contract gets to its end, there will be playoff teams that will want him in the lineup, and if the Canadiens are a playoff team by that point, they will want him because you talk about this team. And there is a concern about the size and a lot of small forwards. He's just a guy that just is a big body and is heavy and really wears the other team down. And I think that there's value in that as well, even if he's not scoring or making plays as often as you would like.
That's it. And there's another Finn on the team that is battling for that, lower, like bottom 6 spot, and that is Jesse Ylonen, right? And tonight he had a pretty big opportunity playing with Owen Beck and Joshua Roy, 2 very offensively minded players who can generate some stuff. I didn't mind Jesse Ylonen tonight. I thought he had some good flashes, and I like that he was used on the PK as well. I thought that was interesting, and he did fairly well. That's not a facet that we're used to. We know him as the shooter, right? That power play guy, but I'm glad to see that he can be useful on the back end as well. So as it stands today, like, do you think Jesse Ylonen makes the team?
Yes. And the reason for that is because I don't think they want to put him on waivers because I think he'd get picked up.
For sure.
And it's for the reasons you mentioned. Like he's a lot more versatile than he was when he first came to the Rocket. When he first came to the Rocket, he was a shooter. He would have that shot on the half wall on the power play, and that would basically be it. That was his game. And the scoring numbers, people are like, okay, when is he going to score more? And that's not really the key to his game. The key to the shot will always be there. The shot will always play. Even on the power play when it's not playing well, he's still a threat there, especially the first preseason game. He had like a ton of chances on that half wall. That's his bread and butter right there. And I think that's you see him on the PK. They're kind of if he makes the team, it's going to be in that kind of bottom 6 role where he's not necessarily going to get top power play minutes, but if you can also kill penalties, then that's another avenue to make the team. And I think that's why Joshua Roy's floor is so high, is because even if he doesn't score as much as he did in junior or at the World Juniors, he's becoming a really good penalty killer and forechecker. And I think that's something that a lot of these players, in the organization are going to have to learn because they're not all going to play in the top 6. There's just too many of them. So I think the more versatile you are, the more chances you have. And Joel Bouchard, when he was the coach of the Rockets, said, if you're a center, you have 4 spots. If you can play the wing, you have 8 spots. If you can play both, you have 12 spots. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to do. If you can kill penalties and play power play and be a good player at both ends, then you have a lot more opportunity. And he don't mind putting you in that 4th line role, right? Like it's a lot different than, and he's getting older, so he doesn't really need to necessarily get minutes. He just needs to play in the NHL, I think. And I think that he's a player that will make the team. I don't know if there's going to be a spot for him opening night, depending on injuries and whatever else happens. But I definitely think that he's going to be at least an extra body because I don't think they want to put him on waivers because he has value. And there's a lot of value to that. going forward, and I think that he deserves it. I think that he's been a player who you saw at the end of last season. He wasn't scoring as much, but he was in the right place a lot, and I think that there's a lot to be said to that. For a player who they spent a second round pick on him, and have developed him, and I think that they'll want to keep him around.
Yeah, I also agree. Like I think he has a spot on this team. I wouldn't gamble with waivers. And speaking of waivers, right, we have to mention Caden Primo, who it's looking like the avenue he's going to be taking. Right, granted, he did look good tonight. Like 24 saves on 26 shots. The 2 goals he allowed can't really do much, right? Like is just a laser by Matthew Nyes, and then the second goal deflected off Owen Beck. It's just a tough bounce, but I thought he was calmer tonight. I thought he didn't look as, how can I say, like stressed or jittery maybe. I felt him calm, and every second that he's on the ice counts for him, right? Because he is fighting for a job. Granted, if he doesn't get picked up, he's going to go back to Laval where he's comfortable, where we know he's going to perform. But at the same time, he's fighting for other teams, right? There's other teams that need goalies that are watching this right now, and they know this guy might be available any minute, and they might just jump on him and take a gamble.
Yeah, I mean, you see a guy like Spencer Martin being claimed on waivers. Like goalies are really easy to claim on waivers, especially
Montembeault,
like early. Yeah. Or especially early in the season, especially in camp, because the teams always are looking for, like, it's easy to stash a goalie as your third goalie on the roster, and I think that there's look, Montreal and claimed Samuel Montembeault a couple years ago, and he's kind of in the same position that Primo was in, right? A guy who had a good junior career. I could argue that Primo had an even better NCAA career than Montembeault did. And then, he gets claimed. He doesn't really perform. He kind of hit and miss, and now he's become a true NHL goalie, representing Canada at the World Championships. And I think that Primo's kind of in that same spot. And I would be surprised if the Canadiens. I wouldn't be surprised if the Canadiens held 3 goalies to open the season. They have a lot of players who can go down without needing waivers, even if it's short term. But it wouldn't surprise me if they, maybe the Tampa Bay is a team that need goaltending. Do they maybe say, hey, you're not gonna get one of these guys on waivers? Do you want to trade for a Primo or even a Jake Allen? Maybe even I don't think they're going to trade Montembeault, but he'd obviously bring back a lot more. He has a better salary, but I think that the Canadiens have a lot of options. And what's interesting to me is I wonder if they don't make a change of goaltending and bring in a goaltender who doesn't need waivers on an NHL contract, because the concerning thing for me is if they trade Allen or Primo, let's say, or if they lose Primo on waivers, the only call-up option they have is Jakub Dobeš, and I don't know if you want to necessarily rush him into the NHL in his first professional season. So there is a need for the Canadiens to get another goalie under NHL contract, and obviously I don't think they want to use a 5th spot on a goalie, technically 6 because they have Carey Price on there. So I don't know if they want to use a spot on a goalie without losing one, but I think if they do make a trade for a goalie, they get one back that doesn't need waivers, that can move up and down easily. Maybe even a goalie who clears waivers, as we get closer to the start of the season, a goalie who cleared waivers already, flip him, and have another option, because we've seen it the last couple of years, where goalie, even Primo has been pushed into an NHL role a lot sooner than he would have liked, didn't perform well. There was that crazy year when they had to bring up Michael McNiven, who was hurt, and he played a period, and was obviously hurt. Montembeault played the half season hurt, right? He needed surgery as soon as the season ended. Like you don't want to be in that situation where you have Dobeš in his first professional season, forced to play NHL minutes or sit on the bench when he should be playing hockey games. And I think that's a pretty big concern, I would say, or it should be, front of mind for the organization. That hey, if you lose Primo on waivers, and then somebody gets hurt, or if you trade one of your goalies and then somebody gets hurt, they need to have somebody else there. And I think that's something. And we mentioned the forwards that they have. They obviously have a lot of D as well. Like they have the bandwidth to make a kind of move like that. And I'm curious if they do, because I think that as we get into the season, that's something, they have depth in Laval, right? They have Strauss-Mann, they have Zachary Amo. Those are guys who can play minutes in Laval. Absolutely. The issue is they're on AHL contracts. They can't be called up. So either they're going to have to sign one of those guys or they're going to have to do something else, if it gets to that point. And I think that they want to have maybe a little bit more flexibility. At least I would. If I was in charge of Canadiens, I would want to have more flexibility there. And I think that's a concern. Like, it's not a big concern if you keep Primo as a third goalie, whatever, that's fine. But then, if you lose one of your goalies, it becomes thin very quickly.
That's it. I mean, fingers crossed. The best case scenario would be that Primo clears waivers. He's in Laval. Everybody's happy. He's still in the organization, but it is a risk because he is playing well so far, and there is potential with him. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the team picked him up if he were on waivers. Now, like I mentioned, there were very few players that I was excited to see tonight, but one of them was most definitely Joshua Roy, because he has been excellent so far in training camp. I mean, if you're going strictly based off merit, I think he deserves a spot on this team. Will he? Probably not, because you want to ease him into the pros, get him some time in Laval, big minutes, right? But man, is he good. Like even tonight, he didn't show up on the stat sheet, but it's fine. He played a fantastic game. He was reliable on both ends, as we've come to know recently. And just overall, I was really, really pleased with this game.
Yeah, I think that what you're seeing in Joshua Roy is kind of the best case scenario with him. Like he just doesn't have a bad game.
No.
And I think that's one of those things where players play their way into those situations, right? Like, like even when he was a junior player, he reminded me of Brendan Gallagher, where they just kept him around because they couldn't cut him. Like there was no chance that Brendan Gallagher, his first year in camp, was going to make that team, but he was like one of the last cuts because they just didn't want to send him back to junior. And Joshua is kind of, him and Jared Davidson have really been the eye openers in this training camp. And I maybe not eye opener for Roy, because he's been on the radar for and his expectations have kind of gone up and up as we've gone on. But I think that it just seems like he never has a bad game. He's just super solid. And I think that I agree with you. I think he's going to start in Laval, but what a luxury that is, right? Like, it's
great problem.
Like the Canadiens haven't had a player like Joshua Roy in Laval, maybe ever. I feel like I think he'd instantly be the top forward prospect they had there. Not counting, when they had Caulfield there for games, like not counting those kinds. And obviously he has to show what he can do in Laval. Like, I don't want to say I'm not saying he's going to be better than Raphael Harvey-Pinard or Jesse Lynn, like some of the top scorers. Charles Houdon was great in Laval as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying as a prospect, as a prospect, he'd be the top prospect there. And he's someone that, I think the reason why he's getting all these looks, like you saw him in the scrimmages before camp, before preseason started, with Doc and Monahan, I think, or my memory is failing me, but it was definitely two NHLers, maybe Newhook, I forget. It's been, I barely remember what happened yesterday, but he got looks with NHLers, and the reason why you want to do that is not necessarily to start the year, but if they get called up, can they go into that kind of role? And I think that, if he gets called up, he's somebody who can play in that top six. He can play in the bottom six. He can kill penalties. Like, if he needs to get called up because there's injuries, he's, I think he's probably already at the top of the list in terms of call up. And just a very solid player. Like, so many times when you have like these players that could be good offensively, if they don't score, they don't look very good. Joshua Waugh, it doesn't matter. He doesn't have to score to look good. Like, he's just super solid. Like, we talk about it in Eyes on the Prize with some of our prospect people. And like, usually prospects improve what they're already good at. Joshua Waugh became a completely different player. Like, his weaknesses became strengths. And I think that's something you just never see. And I think that's why he's such a good player, and that's why I think the expectations are so high with him. And yeah, like, I'm not saying he's going to become like a top scorer in the NHL level, but he just never has a bad game. And I think that he's a big piece of this future, because if he can hit like the 90th percentile of his potential, that's huge for the Canadiens. Absolutely
Massive.
huge, because you have, if you can join that core of like Doc and Slavkovsky and Caulfield and Suzuki, if you can join that group, and they add another player there, like, you're laughing, especially where he was drafted.
Big time.
It's just, they took Daniil Sobolev before Joshua Waugh in the same draft. Like I don't want to say the Canadiens are like that smart, because literally in the same round they picked Daniil Sobolev before Joshua Waugh. Like, but you know what? Sometimes you need a little bit of luck, and all the credit to Joshua Waugh, because he took that as a wake up call when he dropped to the 5th round and hasn't looked back, and that's a credit to him.
That's a fantastic value, 5th round pick. Even if he just becomes an NHLer, that's a great pick. So he has the potential to be a top 6 guy, which is absurd, and I'm so happy for him. I'm really, really excited to see him likely in Laval this year. But I want to emulate what our friend Matt Drake said on the show. I want to see him with Nick and Cole at some point in the preseason. Just try it. Might as well, right? Like, he has the brain for it. He can think at their speed. Just do it. It'll be fun. Another player that I was excited to see, and I did speak about it with our buddy Matt and Charles-Alexis, that was Logan Mailloux. I wanted to see more of him because I really liked his first game. And tonight he was the most used defenseman. He played 20 minutes. Didn't look out of place. I thought he, in fact, was probably one of the most reliable defensemen tonight on the defensive end, which is great, because that's been his concern. That's been his main kind of hitch, is that, defensively he's a bit loose. He makes mistakes. Tonight I thought he was involved. He was physical, aggressive, didn't really, focus too much on the offense. He really was reliable on his own end. I was very pleased with Mailloux tonight.
Yeah, what you're seeing with Logan Mailloux is a player who really seems like he's learning quickly, and I think that was one of the concerns, because there are a lot of concerns with just his hockey sense, right? Like, that was the reason why his defense has been an issue. There was an issue, there was a question of whether he would try to do too much offensively as well, and I think that he's kind of learned in the span of like a couple of preseason games, what he can do. I still think he needs time in Laval, because
no doubt.
I think let's face it, the Toronto Maple Leafs didn't have their best players out there today. Like, it's gonna be a lot different when you have Matthews and Nylander and Marner going against you than when you have David Kampf and Matthew Nye. Like, they're good players, but I mean, they're not the same quality, right? Like, those are like the low end NHLers you're going to see, right? So I think he still needs time, because I think the consistency is still a question mark. But you can definitely see the flashes, right? Like, the offense is there. The abilities are there. I wish he would hit the net more often. I think that's the biggest issue right now, is that he's missing the net on shots that he should be hitting net on, and it kind of ruins the scoring chance, because the puck goes around the net. Like, you see it all the time, right? Like, he's not the only defenseman in the league that does that. But when the thing with him is that he's aggressive, right? So he goes into like the circles, shoots, and misses the net, and then the puck goes around the other end, and he's out of position, and that's kind of where you get into trouble. But I think that, yeah, there's definitely flashes. He probably looks. Like I said, he's learning faster than I would have expected him to. But again, I want to see him in Laval see how he does on a day-to-day basis, because I do think that that's where you're going to see where he really is. Preseason's great, but even the top players in the preseason are going 70%, right? Like that's why Fraser Minton looks so good, right? Because he's going 100%, right? Like the guys who go 100% in preseason are the guys that look the best. And it's not necessarily going to be like that in the regular season. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot to be excited about with him. I think that the calls for him to start the year in the NHL and that he's the best defenseman prospect in the organization was a little bit too quick there. I think it's a little bit of pressure that he didn't necessarily need. But I think that, yeah, he's definitely shown some things that show why people are excited about him. And the downsides of his game haven't really appeared that often. But it's a process, right? It's we talk about Justin Barron. I feel like Justin Barron is at a better point than Logan Mailloux is now, and Justin Barron still has those moments where he doesn't look very good, right? So it's a work in progress. He doesn't have to be perfect, Logan Mailloux, because he brings so much offensively, and that's going to be the key to learning how to do that, right? You see it with a guy like Matthias Norlinder, right? Like, before coming to North America, he was in highlight reels. He was like doing these behind, between the legs moves, and you don't see any of that. And it's because you're kind of play conservative, right? When you're trying to make the team, when you're learning, and I think that that's something that he's going to have to learn, because if you clip his wings, and he's also not solid defensively, you're going to look like Norlinder did the first couple of years in Laval, where, okay, what does he do well, right? Like, and now you're starting to see Norlinder step up a little bit more and things like that. And I think that, if Mailloux can balance the two, he'll be on the right track. But yeah, I kind of like Joshua Roy, no need to rush him. And I think that he's even farther away than Roy is. I don't think that they're really comparable in terms of where they are on the depth chart. But the good news is that they have him. They can take their time with him, and maybe play with a guy like William Trudeau or Jaden Struble and Laval, and kind of be a strong second pair power play guy. You talked about Justin Barron before manning the power play in Laval. Logan Mailloux, same thing, right? Like, put him on the power play in Laval, let him do his thing, and see where it goes. There's a lot of players in Laval who can play on that power play. Nicolas Baudin is another one. Like, he transformed that power play when he was acquired from Chicago last year. So
he did.
Yeah, but I think Mailloux is a player who has shown me a little bit more than I was expecting, especially after that first rookie camp game. Like, it was a little rough early on, but he's gotten better, and you can see him making better decisions already. And that's a testament to his ability to learn, and that's what he'll need to do. Yeah, that's what he'll need to do.
Yeah, and I think Laval is going to be the perfect place for him. A young core. They're all honing in on development there, and I think Laval is going to be a great show this year. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, do so. I know I will. I'll be in attendance for a few games, no doubt about it. So, Jared, next game tomorrow already, right? Quick turnaround. Likely going to be a bigger lineup this time. All right, we can expect the big boys to play. Should be a much more interesting game. So what are you expecting? What do you want to see from tomorrow's game?
I just want to see more progression. I want to see, first of all, who they put with Suzuki and Caulfield if they play. I want to see who they give that chance to. I want to see a little bit more from guys who are on the bubble. Guys like Emil Heineman, I think he's had a really quiet camp. Not that I necessarily expected him to make the team, but some people did. And I don't think he's really in that conversation, to be quite honest, right now. I want to see what Alex Newhook can do. I really like what he does, and I'm very curious where they're going to put him. And he's a guy that I'm excited to see. Elias Anderson is another guy who those bubble, like in the preseason, that's what I'm looking for. I like to see those bubble guys. I want to see how they perform, where they go, whether they make management have a hard decision to make. And I think that's what's fun. Guys like Michael Pezzetta, who's basically playing for his roster spot as well. And really what I want to see is, I don't know if Juraj Slafkovsky is going to play or if they're going to give him a night off. He's already played 2 preseason games. But I want to see more progression from him, because his growth has been really what I think the story of camp, in terms of his,
For sure.
He's, yes, it's preseason. Yes, it's not the greatest competition, but he's trying different things. And I think that's the key that you want to see from him. And I think that's really good as well. I want to see David Reinbacher. I feel like he's been okay. Like he's been there, right? And I think that's fine. He wasn't expected to be kind of that guy you can put into your lineup right away. And I think it's good that he's kind of been off the radar a bit, so they don't feel the urge to put him in there. But I just want to see more of him, see what he learns and things like that. So yeah, it should be an interesting group tomorrow, more interesting than tonight. And I think that there's going to be a lot of cuts after tomorrow's game as well. Laval starts their training camp on Monday. So yeah, guys are kind of giving that last gasp before they make that first big round of cuts, and a lot of those guys are going to be obvious. They're not going to cut the guys that are on the bubble right away. No. But I'm very curious to see what's going to happen if Jake Allen plays. I'm very curious how he bounces back, because he wasn't very good against Ottawa, and I want to see him if he plays a little, whether it's tomorrow or later in the preseason, because they might make that decision easy where they trade Allen because Primo outplayed him. It's getting to that point where they might have to make that decision. I don't think they're there yet. But it's preseason's interesting if you're not looking for good hockey. If you're looking for stories, it's really intriguing. If you're looking for good hockey, it's, sometimes you get a good game. Like the Ottawa game was fun.
It was.
This game was not fun. And tomorrow should be a little bit more fun. But it's preseason. And it's kind of 50-50.
That's it. No, today was one to forget on all aspects, right? A loss and just an overall just boring game, right? Nothing happening, no one standing out. We move on. And you know what? Thank you, Jared Book. Jared Book from Habs, Eyes on the Prize. Go follow him on Twitter. Go follow Eyes on the Prize on Twitter as well. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for watching the game and indulging me in conversation. Hopefully we have a better one tomorrow, and hopefully you get to come back on soon. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Jared Book from Habs, Eyes on the Prize. Now, obviously, I got to give my man Tony a little one spruce. There you go, Tony. We hope to see you soon, and we hope that you can actually find Messi in Florida. Not quite much luck yet, but you know what? You're not back yet, so hopefully there's still time for you. And for you all watching, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully the show was more enjoyable than the game. If it was, then mission accomplished. So thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and all that good stuff. For Sammy, Juliana, Agnello, Rosa Cavallaro over at Master Control, their Cavallaro, I'm producer Shayne. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.